Hello and welcome to the Queer Manga Institute's Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robear, the Executive Director and President of the Institute. And along with many familiar faces, we see some new faces joining us each week. So let me briefly tell you about the Queer Manga Institute and the mission. The Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to expanding consciousness through the ancient practice of ecstatic trance postures. It was the insightful work of anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman, the founder of the Institute, who found the clues and revived this practice. She searched the oldest evidence she could find that was available, and she discovered it in the world's collection of prehistory and indigenous art, and decoded these selected artifacts as ritual instructions. And as part of the mission of the Institute, is to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. It was Dr. Goodman, in our opinion, that provided a roadmap of how someone with an academic approach can delve deep into the world of direct experience. And as an educational institution, we recognize that to thrive, we're going to take an open approach. And so we invite scholars of parallel research in related fields to help broaden the scope of our work and exploration. And if you haven't been with us for the last several months, we've had a full spectrum of topics from neuroscience to anthropology to mysticism to trance to archaeology to archaeoastronomy to shamanism to sacred landscapes to sacred dance to mythology. I mean, it goes on. And of course, the many aspects of our own work, from the origin story to the indicators of being in trance, theories of how and why it works, and to now, 50 years later, where we're going and how we're growing. So, and we want to invite you to enjoy these discussions. They're available nowadays on YouTube and podcasting, and you can see those on our website. When you find time, we invite you to participate. Today, we're going to touch on a core aspect, a core mission of the Institute. As an anthropological research organization with the focus on altered states of consciousness, the ASCs, our findings and experiences in ecstatic trance find that they have reflections and connections to the ancient shamanic experiences and traditional indigenous cultures throughout the world. And we're seeing a worldwide interest in a rediscovering of the healing aspect of trance and shamanic practices. It appears that academia continues to open itself to the fact that trance is not some sort of pathology, but rather it's an expanded and full integration of the human experience. And they're now finding that people from around the world with proper induction can have these kinds of experiences. And so it appears that as we continue to look at the experience of altered states of consciousness in trance, we better understand what the whole shamanic phenomena was about, the roots of direct experience, along with what we're having now in our experiences with ecstatic trance postures. So before I turn it over to my wife, I wanted to do something special today. This is the weekend, the birthday of the founder of the Institute, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. So I took a small audio clip of her talking about ritual. And I wanted to share that with you today to bring her voice into the conversation. She would be, I think,
107.
107. Okay, yeah. So it's always a pleasure to share her voice in the conversation. At the Institute, we use her all the time in our presentations. It's more difficult on Zoom because providing video seems to freeze up for people, and so we don't want to do video. But I did do an audio clip of her so I can bring her voice into our community today.
And show an artifact that will be referenced.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So let me stick my right screen up. Here we go.
So there she is. And also I want to say Belinda Gore's birthday is
today, I think.
Today as well.
And, yeah,
so they always share
yesterday.
their birthdays. And she was the vice president of the Institute and then the president. And we just want to give a shout out to her as well.
Absolutely. Let me hit this audio and tell me if you can hear it.
One of the universally shared traits of religion, religious behavior, is ritual. Ritual produces a transformation. What kind of transformation depends on the ritual and on the need of the society. For example, it can bring a transformation of a sick person to a healthy person. That is, it brings healing. It can involve initiation of the young people, boys, very often also girls, being initiated into adulthood. The question is, of course, what exactly happens when we change our state of consciousness? It is said quite generally that we see a different reality. The question then arises, what is reality? And for 2,000 years, our European philosophers have tried to answer that question, and they have never gotten to any reasonable answer. What the religious specialist says is something actually much more reasonable. He says, there is reality, we don't know what that is, but we know that it has various phases. There is the ordinary reality, and then there is the sacred reality, the reality into which we step when we are in the religious altered state of consciousness. There is a beautiful representation of that in a little charming figurine from Tlatelolco, from Mexico. It's about 3,500 years old. It is a little human figure, a woman. She has wide thighs and a narrow, delicate hip, delicate waist, and she has two faces, and with one face, she looks into one reality, and with the other face, she looks into the other reality. It seems to me nobody could say it more cogently. Now, what exactly happens when you go into the alternate reality? The change to the religious altered state of consciousness is momentous. The changes in the body are momentous. That shouldn't be such a change of understanding, because after all, we know, for example, what happens in the body if you just open your eyes. That's a momentous event on the physiological basis. And this is also a momentous event on the neurophysiological basis when we change our state of consciousness. Now, how is this brought about? It is brought about usually by rhythmic stimulation. All around the world, people are aware of rhythmic stimulation. It can also be brought about by singing, by clapping. Clapping is also rhythmic stimulation. Ritual without a switch into the altered state of consciousness is simply not possible.
There we
Very
go.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just nice to share Felicitas' voice. It's always an emotional moment somewhat for me because of just the power of her intelligence and her ability to share such insight into these types of topics. I mean, the old saying that it takes a village. That's why we have all of you here today to fill those footsteps. All of us with the research and the way that we participate and the way that we all have different pieces of the puzzle to share. And so today we're so fortunate to have an anthropologist join us and to be able to take us where we're at today, to looking back into history at the shamanic cultures and what the shamanic cultures experienced, and then looking at today's experience and what we learned from that and how our experiences have a resonance with that experience. So to do that, I'm going to let Laura do the introduction, and I want to thank you all for being here today. And so my wife, Laura Lee, she's the Director of Outreach, and she has plenty of titles because you don't get paid here, so it's good at least to have a title. So,
Well, the question comes up again and again and again is like, what does this work mean? And some people who are newly coming in say, oh my God, this is great. It's cosmic TV. And we're like, yeah, but it's much, much more than that. And we've been teaching this work since 2000. We gave our first workshop in 2000 in Seattle. 30 people showed up. It was like, oh, there is interest in this. Oh my God. And we've been taking workshops with Felicitas and at the Institute and others for a decade before that.
Yeah.
So, we've had a lot of looking at our own experiences and other people's experiences in that time. And I just wanted to give you a sense of the lessons that I see. I want to hear from you what you'll see. We're going to hear from our anthropologist guest here in a minute, her deep study into shamanic cultures, what she sees. But Christine and I were having a conversation. I'm like, Are experiences really related to the experiences that you see when you dive into these shamanic cultures that you study so deeply? You're reading the iconography, you're reading the culture, you're reading the artifacts. Let's make this comparison. And so let me just point out what we see here. We want to do this comparison. And I just want to say that as I see it, let me speak in mythic language because there's really no other language to describe this. That pain is a condition of this. Somebody yesterday said, my thumbs hurt. I can't do this work. My thumbs, I'm like, that's a passing thing. It always happens, generally. It certainly happened for me, that your first several experiences in ecstatic trance postures, pain will come up. And Goodman always described it as your blocks are being cleared. The spirits, and you can define spirits as you please. There's no belief system in this. We're just sharing our own take on the lessons involved, but there's no belief system here. I want to make that really clear. She would say that your body's being prepped. The spirits are coming in and clearing your energy blocks, your channels. So pain can come up. So just bear with it, and it will just resolve, and indeed just clear energy, blissful energy will come through in its place. And indeed, that was the case. So it is like you are being conditioned for this work. You are being cleared and prepped, and they're so happy to have you. And here it comes. We often see big, giant eyes in our visual screen, even today. Oh, ooh, you're showing up, really? Well, welcome. I get this kind of welcome. We also undergo an initiation, a life and death and rebirth. We're shown that the cycles that we've been living continue. We see what needs to be cast off, that its time is done. Some little deaths, some part of us, some misunderstandings, emotional dross, past events or trauma, our old self, some part of it. We're prompted to let it go, to make room for the new that wants to come in. We're also shown that there are grander schemes of things. These life cycles are continuous on the cosmic scale. Life is born, that form of it dies only to be regenerated in some new form. And then it's like wash, rinse, repeat over and over and over again. And we are assured that each of us, every living thing, that we are eternal, and that we take on many forms and we cast off many forms on this endless journey. That we've been on this journey, we're just now awakening to it, and we can rejoice in it. We're okay with it. Death holds little fear because we know we'll continue in some form. And part of that lesson is that boundaries dissolve, shapes and forms change, but the core of us endures, and life finds a way. It's an adventure that goes on. And whether you're an atom or an entire cosmos, it's all one life in its many parts. And as these boundaries dissolve, we find we're in communication with the web of life. It speaks to us, we speak with it. We're in a conversation, a dance, a celebration. As we walk in each other's moccasins, we see through each other's eyes, we listen with each other's ears, we share each other's heart and mind in our peak moments. We're seeing on behalf of the Creator and reflecting this back to that we stand on the edge of the universe with momentary flares thrown up so that we can catch a glimpse of infinity, of the void. We can feel the winds of the universe blow through our hair. We can see forever, if just for that peak moment. And we find in that we are all one. We're all in this together and forever. We see that life, all of life, is sacred. And what's more, all of creation is alive. It's humming, it's vibrating, it's singing, it's celebrating, it's joyous and ecstatic. And it embraces each of us. We're a vital part of it. We are the all, and the all is all of us. And as the veil momentarily drops, we find we're a conduit for this life force. The winds of the universe is also our breath. It breathes us. The universe, as Monica said, is universing us. Boundaries dissolve and we are stripped down to nothing. We are formless. We're reduced to the void, a pinpoint. Yet in that we are everywhere. We are nothing, yet we are everything. We are the consciousness that is the all. We find that before we are then put back together anew, reassembled, better than before, but changed. We find that we have a duty to life, to show up and listen and participate, to celebrate and throw open these doors to these other realms. We find the ancestors are there to welcome us when those doors are thrown open. We cross the threshold. Our own ancestors and our larger family, all of life on earth. We've been shown in visions. It's not just our human family, though they show up. It's all the animal spirits, the mammals, the reptiles, the insects, the flora, the fauna, the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom. All of Gaia is our home, our family, from the first cells, from amoebas to us today, for all time, all the ages, all stages of evolution. We find that our family is not just those inhabiting our planet or our star, but all the stars, the entire cosmos, the celestial beings, every atom, and certainly the stars in whose furnace we and everything literally was forged. We find that not only our physical universe, but all its realms, from the seen to the unseen, to the subtlest, to that void again, it's our home. All of this is our family. Goodman would say that the spirits too are our brothers and our sisters. We are all one family. We are as much energy beings as physical beings as they are. It's all sacred. That's our relationship to it. It's all hallowed ground, all of it. This life force in all of its permutations, that life force that powers the cosmos, is the life force that flows through us. It's wisdom, it's vitality, it's nurturing. It asks us to be a conduit between earth and the heavens over and over. We are rocketed by this life force in all the various ways that it picks us up and catapults us through tunnels, through spirals and vortexes, through lightning bolts, through the embrace of the goddess. It fills us up and carries us from Mother Earth to the stars and back again, through wormholes, through a ladder, over mountaintops, atop the tree of life, as starbursts of energy. We carry messages, gratitude, information, blessings, hopes and dreams and prayers to and fro from ourselves on behalf of the cosmos. We are transmitters and receivers of what all we know not, just that we are, and we're privileged to do so, to be that. Perhaps we take the life force, we help it take aim with our attention, our participation as a courier between realms. We must be its assistants, its couriers, its liaisons. This life force comes to us in so many guises. It takes our breath away in the encounter. It heals, comforts, reassures, scolds, inspires, whispers in our ear, direct into our brain. It shows us symbols, gestures in sign language, what we are to learn. It mind melds with us. It downloads into us. It instructs. It opens our eyes and our minds and our hearts. It tells us that we matter. It enlists us in its eternal mission. We walk the same path in the here and now that those who came before us walked in their time. We are walking that same road. It helps us be fully what we are, to live a life as fully as we can, with a foot in this world and a foot in that. Goodwin described the non-ordinary reality as the other side of the coin to our ordinary reality. Two sides of one universe. One does not exist without the other. They are mutually dependent. She says the spirits need us just as we need them. And they celebrate every time that we make the journey to that meeting place, to dance with them around the campfire as we have done throughout our time here. And this helps us see the universe as more complete terms than our science has yet to recognize. There is much more to a universe that is intelligent, alive, breathing, pulsing, conscious, awakening us, with us, through us. This relationship cannot be lost or ignored in the long run. We might have been cut loose temporarily in our own era from our cultural DNA, who knew all this, but the physiological DNA remains. It's part of us. It's built into the very fiber of us. Our own design revolves around us. It is the life force that animates us. our countenance with the sacred, with these other realms, it will bubble up again in any age, again and again. It's not just that we need to communicate with the spirits, is that we already do, just as all of life does. It's really all of life talking with all of life, one great swirling, animated, lively, joyous, wondrous conversation, and we can consciously engage with it. Or we can remain unconscious to it, but it goes on, and some part of us is there. We can open up to it or not, our choice. We can remain, as Goodman says, ecstasy deprived, or we can dive in fully engaged and become fully human. We are always invited. The door will always swing open for us. We can always find our way. We can stand with these two outlooks simultaneously. Similarly to one foot in this realm, one foot in that realm, I find that I personally can embrace the lessons and not displace my foundation and appreciation in our scientific age and all that it brings us. I am firmly grounded in this reality and in this worldview and in all the gifts that our age brings us. But I can also join in, as we have talked with our Australian friends who comment about the Aboriginal elders that they know, that they can appreciate their own culture and all the gifts it brings, as well as ours. They don't have to see conflict. They can embrace both. It's an expansion, not a replacement. It's an addition, more functional, not less, more functional when we can have a realm in a foot in both realms. And I also want to say that this is what this work has taught me over many years. And I'm not saying that's only through ecstatic trance postures and trucking with the spirits through this doorway in that realm that these lessons have been imparted. I do believe it's in a benevolent universe that uses redundancy and many, many avenues to deliver its message. So if this is eternal, if this is universal, there's many avenues to find this. But I believe that this is what it's taught me, and I like this one way of teaching it. And it's akin to the spontaneous mystical experiences I've had as well. So I think that for me, this is just what the universe wants to teach me. And perhaps it's shared with all of you. I don't know. You'd have to tell me that yourself. And so I am very pleased to introduce our anthropologist today, our special guest, Christine Vanpool, who has, in her own work, diving deep into the shamanic cultures of old in her academic studies, has also been with us in this journey for many, many months. And she teaches with her husband, Todd, at the University of Missouri. He will be joining us as well next month on another topic. But here, we're very pleased to have you, Christine, again today, and to take it away from the academic point of view.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Paul. And that was a fabulous introduction to the work, Laura. And you hit all the high points. I don't think I could do any better. Mine's definitely more of a scientific look today, just because I'm in the habit of doing PowerPoint scientific style presentations. And we'll be covering aspects of everything you've already discussed, just with a little more detail, hopefully good detail. Let me share a screen. I found it.
Okay.
It's showing screens that are not open for some reason. I don't know. Zoom's always a mystery to me. I would think I'd be better at it now, but anyway, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. As a degree in anthropology with a look toward archaeology, we in archaeology and the New World, we have a couple premises that how we do interpretation of the deep past, so things that are 25 or 45,000 years ago. How do archaeologists begin to bring meaning to stuff, to groups that are long gone, extinct, if you will? One is a uniformitarian principle, and that is the same process that operates today, operates the same way in the past. And we know through physical anthropology that anatomically modern humans, at least skeletons, are starting around 200,000 years ago. we think based on material culture that there's some type of brain shift, but this is all speculative, that maybe something happened around 50,000 years ago. And that's also about the time we see the first indications of religion and possibly shamanic religions. With that premise of our physical and mind body, that we can use what we know about ourselves as humans to understand humans in the past. And this is exactly the point that Goodman makes in several of their publications, and one that both Laura and Paul mentioned when we do the trainings on Saturday. So definitely the same premise works in our work. We also use, as archaeologists, cross-cultural analyses, which we take global patterns of what humans do to understand particular nuances of grand cultures, if you will, universal premises. Or another way is direct historical approach. So I go out to Zuni, New Mexico, and I am there, and then I see a site that's 600 years old, and then I can use what they tell us about kivas and work that back to say, wow, that was a kiva. It probably had rituals involving things we call kachinas, and that would be a direct historical approach. The contextual approach is another way we do. So sometimes we can use cross-cultural analysis, but we also use the archaeological evidence, the bits and pieces together as a puzzle, and how those work together. One of my favorite example comes from a Moshe specialist, Christopher Donnan, who talks about meaning and iconography. It's like reading Christmas cards. So if we were to amass enough Christmas cards, Judeo-Christian cards, with Santa Claus and the sled, we would quickly figure out that this time of year is usually winter, and usually it's probably a magical religious activity in the sense that we know that humans really can't have reindeers that fly in the sky. And so we could use that type of Christmas card analogy to understand things in the past, and that's a contextual approach. We use context and contextual approaches and cross-cultural analyses, direct historic approaches when we think about shamanism in its practice based on shamanic traditions from the New World, especially North American Native Americans, and Africa, Australia, and Asia. And so we've used all these different people globally to come up with some universals. Let's look at some of these, how they play out as we as archaeologists interpret the Upper Paleolithic, especially of France and Spain. It lasts from about 60,000 years ago, but later in some areas to around 10,000 years ago when the glaciers are retreating, but continues to the historic period in some areas, especially up toward the Arctic Circle. It is characterized by more complex stone tool technology. We're starting to see people are doing all kinds of fabulous arrowheads, Attalal dart points. They're also starting to do more carvings. They're actually already know how to make ceramic figurines. And we see greater social complexity and obvious signs of a shamanic religion. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a second. We know for sure that much of this is associated with modern Homo sapiens. Looking at trying to understand that phenomenon, the Upper Paleolithic, we use general hunter and gatherer analogy. All hunting and gathering groups that have been studied on the globe have some form of art. That's a given. We as humans have art. Various purposes of this art, but at least some of the art reflects religion in some ways, at least what we know from cross-cultural analyses. Over 90% of all known hunter and gatherers have shamanic traditions that actually use art. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. And often this is from David Lewis Williams, one of the big stars on this research. But worldwide hunter and gatherers use caves for shamanic activity. It could be that when you go deep into a cave, you don't have all the sounds, so you have sensory deprivation. That's one way that you can induce a altered states of consciousness, is through getting rid of all the external senses. And at the same time, it looks like shamans worldwide and hunter-gatherers, they'll paint or carve on the cave walls. And if a cave's not available, they will use rock faces. And so we find this throughout, again, the world. We also find from hunter and gatherer shamanic practices that the shamans tell us that they transform into liminal creatures. So a person in trance, as we all know, sometimes you feel like you've really metamorphized or transformed into a bear person or maybe a buffalo person. These type of things that Goodman tells us in her studies, that yes, those transformations are usually cultural dependent, and people go into those as needed for their own purposes. These are in anthropology taught anthropomorphs, and they're usually tied to shamanic transformations. So often in the old days, when an anthropologist saw an anthropomorph like a bison man, they say, oh, wow, it's a shaman. Well, that's only one sort of data. So a lot of more modern anthropologists said, now, wait a minute. You can't just say, oh, it's an anthropomorph, you have a shaman. So one of the brilliant articles written by David Lewis, William, and Dawson was looking at Antoptic imagery, and those are the geometrics, the zigzag, the nets, the grids, the circles that one sees in their brain, not with their physical eyes. And we talked about this a few weeks ago in Antoptic imagery. But when you have Antoptic imagery beside these anthropomorphs, you have more lines of data suggesting that you have a shaman. In the Upper Paleolithic, humans are going to great extent, great difficulty to go into dark places that would require a torch or some type of lamp to find their way through these somewhat dangerous caves. And it took considerable effort to create the paintings in these caves. Also, we know that some of these caves, people are climbing way up high onto the roof, and it's a really dangerous proposition to do these, and yet they create these beautiful rock art images, or rather painted images. Lascaux, which we'll look at a little bit more in a second, we often find in these caves superimposed geometric designs that are out of place on figures, and that is probably in topics being seen in trance states or altered states of consciousness. And again, this is David Lewis Williams' work and John Kloss' work. For the Upper Paleolithic, we see in these caves a lot of animals, but very few humans. When we see clear depictions of humans, we often find human hands. They would take red ochre or something like that and then blow, or take a strong to outline their hand on the cave wall. What we're finding is that 95% of human hands have missing fingers. This doesn't really surprise me when you think about the context and the environment of the Upper Paleolithic. These are Ice Age hunters and gatherers. My gut feeling is that these people probably lose digits from frostbite or things of that nature. And so this may be a real depiction of those type of hands that people would have had because of Ice Age environmental regime. Most commonly, the art includes the anthropomorph, and some of them are very famous. Abbe Brule depicted and did incredible drawings of these things. And of course, we can argue about how accurate his drawings are, but we're finding that often they have anthropomorphic image, and often they're of human reindeer and human bison. And you can tell the human aspect of this guy. He's got human hands, some of the human face, and again, of course, the reindeer. Also, the bull, the bison that's occurring in these sites. Lascaux Cave, one of the famous ones of the so-called Birdman. We know he's in ecstatic trance because he has an erection. Often males have an erection with ecstatic trance. The Doors knew this in their music, The Doors. A lot of different interpretations of this. It could be that he is helping a bull that's lost his bowels, maybe his entrails, maybe he's doing a healing, maybe not. It could be that this is a tutelary animal, a spirit helper guiding this, probably a shaman, a bird-headed shaman, but also this thing on a stick, which sometimes I wonder if it's not a shamanic implement, ritual artifact, maybe even a rattle. That would be totally plausible given our own work. This is one of the ones that Goodman has very early in her book, Where the Spirit Rides the Wind. And I would love to do this posture. She talks about how you have to be at a 45-degree angle, and apparently it's a very powerful posture, very powerful. And I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yes.
That would be for Laura and Paul to talk about.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And so this one's a really old one, 25 to 30,000 years ago. And again, one of Goodman's original postures. And it looks like they are in a static trance, understanding and working with animals. And that's one of the things that we see throughout Upper Paleolithic art, is that they're dealing with animals in trance. And then there's been lots of arguments, and that's the harder part, is to know what that means. Are they overseeing the animals? Are they trying to make sure the herds are reproducing? Are they communing with them? Are they getting divine information? That's another issue that we can't really answer, but it looks like they are communicating with them at some level. Here's another one, a half bison human. It's interesting that a lot of times we see carvings and topics, probably geometrics, that whatever they're doing in trance state, they are eliciting and doing something around the entopics. And that's generally what we see in altered states of consciousness. Yesterday, somebody talked about seeing charcoal drawings on a cave, and I had just put together this slide thinking about this, another great Upper Paleolithic cave site with over 200 engraved images on a wall, and they're superimposed, they overlap, and I think many of us would agree sometimes in trance state, we can see these images and they happen so fleeting and they're so fast and moving. How are you going to put that up on the cave wall? Well, maybe that the overlapping is a potential look at that overlapping that you see in trance, where things are moving back and forth so quickly and does seem superimposed. That's one potential. Again, Upper Paleolithic art, it tends to have bison, horse, stags, reindeer, ibexes, and mammoth. Those are the things that they would see in the real world. Those are the things they're probably also seeing in trance state, or at least what they're interpreting in trance state.
As we do.
I'm sorry?
As we do. And also the flames, the torches.
Yeah, the flames. Absolutely. Well, and there's a really great film about, I think it's Unforgotten Dreams. I'll have to get back to you on that film.
Forgotten Dreams. By
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of the
looks in there.
Absolutely. And the, if you will, the magic is that they use the cave natural rocks that bulge out to make bison and things appear larger than they are. And then with the flickering light, things look like they're moving and hubbing. And so I cannot demonstrate that on a PowerPoint. Plus with videos, as you note, it's really hard to show a video, but incredible what would have happened during that. Above the scene is one of these shamans, sorcerers above this, overseeing these herds, and that superimposed lots. And he was originally called the sorcerer. Henry Abel Henry Brule depicted this originally, drew it, and he's overseeing these. And so his role as a ceremonialist or a shaman or in trance is unclear, but it does look like his position is 12 feet above these animals as an overseer with the animals. So the context and that association is he's definitely overseeing the animals, probably why in trance state, which was transformation. Based on cross-cultural analyses, when we're talking to shaman, medicine man, Quandera, whatever you want to call them, that do these practices, the cave itself is a very powerful entity. It has its own breath, its own being, its own sensibility, and its own volition. And so as it in and of itself is a powerful thing. So that is true. I would agree that most of our native informants would say, oh yeah, the cave is very powerful. And if you ever go into caves or you're standing at them, you can feel them breathing often. They are sentient.
And no wonder we descend into caves so often in our trances, and they
absolutely
like wombs of the Mother Earth. Yeah.
So many different layers of meaning, senses, all kinds of things come into play with caves. And I have a paper on caves. They're just very vast. The number of attributes that humans have with engaging with caves is really phenomenal at different levels. So I could do probably a talk on just caves. They're fascinating for sure. And, you know, just for warmth in the winter in the Upper Paleolithic, you want to be at the front of the cave under the weather, but not too far back at the same time. And then you have to deal with bears and other things in the caves too. So they become dangerous, powerful places. Couldn't help myself. Here's another one of a flute player, and Paul ends the rituals with the flute. I don't know if this is what this person's doing, ending a ritual, but maybe the flute. And we think, at least those that are willing to go more interpretive, think that the flute's probably a form of communication. A lot of tribal people tell us that the flute speaks to the spirit, and the spirits understand the flute. And if you want to talk to the spirits, you do it through the flute. Wow, this whole flute phenomenon with bird bones. This is one of the oldest bird bone flutes from Germany. I threw this in for Tony Hole because he likes to go to Germany. I don't know if he's been to this cave or not, but just remarkable. We have a lot of flutes during the Upper Paleolithic. We know for sure they're playing flutes. So these are also anthropomorphs. Scholars have noted that they have human-like hands. And so anthropomorphic beings with the great flute player also was called a sorcerer too back in the old days.
That's part of our metamorphosis where we
Absolutely part of our
grow the
metamorphosis.
fins, the fangs, the furs, the antlers. Spirit bodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so this is a very short PowerPoint, and we could spend, weeks on the Upper Paleolithic. We could spend weeks on any one of these topics. I'm kind of just doing a little, if you will, survey of ancient shamans today. Let's look at the burial population. And so human burials and physiology come into play. One of the things that Goodman notes is pain is an induction. It may be from cross-cultural analyses that shamans often talk about pain. Pain's not a bad thing, it's a necessary thing. And as one person wrote, pain never hurt anyone. Nice thing to think about. Our culture really gets hung up on pain. You can't have it, but other cultures say pain's natural. And sometimes if you really want to talk to the spirits or have the spirits talk to you, you got to really self-sacrifice. And that pain is that pact between that and the spirit world. This is Donde Venice up in the Czech Republic, like 170 kilometers from Moscow, I believe. When I was an undergrad, I really wanted to be study the mammoth hunters in the Upper Paleolithic. If I could have gone to Russia, I probably would have, but life brought me a different direction. But they used, like Native American Plains Indians that used the bison for everything, they used the mammoth just for everything. And so they used the bones of the mammoth as a superstructure for their dwellings. And then they used the hides and the furs to make tents and clothing. Very elaborate people up in the Ice Age. So again, mammoth bones were sorted by type, and some were used for building structures. There was very little wood on the landscape off the glaciers, so they would have been using those bones. Many people know the Venus Vinonce, and it's a portable art. This one here is probably the best known. And we often think about high rituals are this goddess or something like that. That could be true, but what's really curious is that there are hundreds of such figurines on the floor of the site. We know they have a kiln, and it'll be like 10,000 years later before we get ceramic pottery. So they know how to make fired clay into figurines very early. And they're also making clay figurines of animals as well, and they're also taking ivory and carving it and making beads and effigies and other things. What makes this figurine really fabulous is on her back is a fingerprint of a child, and it looks like the child 6 to 10 years old. So we know that a child formed this in the clay mud and then it was fired. So a child was a part of the equation here, and we might call that person a child, but it looks like the average person didn't live much past 30. So maybe an 11-year-old child in our sensibility was a full-grown woman in that culture.
We had Bruce Bradley tell us about little clay figurines that were found in a ceremonial site in Crow Canyon. And talking with one of the elders of that society, he said that they would sit in long rituals, and they would just pick up clay to do something with their hands and start shaping these things. And then often just set them by the fire so they'd be casually, in effect, fired and last. But that it was really an activity to endure these multi-day rituals.
Absolutely. And then again, they're up on the tundra, the glaciers, probably cold, and having a fire going all this time, or things we might call a kiln going. It would be warmth, but also I would think, soothing to your hands too. Playing, I love when I do pottery, I love the feel of clay. It's very textural. And so you can see where it also be medicinal as well too, I would add. Absolutely. Here's one of the ones that fascinate people, scholars in the lay public light. And there's a lot of web pages on this, both within academia, scholarship, but also common discussions. It's really fascinating. But this may be one of the oldest shaman ladies, potentially. But it's a burial of an elderly female. And just for you guys to think of this, by elderly, they mean 40-year-old woman. And that 40-year-old woman might have had grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren. And so that's that society normal. So this elderly female at 40, she had, her skull reveals a congenital nerve problem. Her face would have been very asymmetrical and it would have drooped and been different. She was buried underneath 2 mammoth shoulder blades and next to the bones of an Arctic fox. Within the site, people have found this carving that they think is a portrait of her. And so it's her, if you will, picture face of the woman right here. Again, perhaps the oldest shaman that could survive pain and do that in a rich burial. And so we see maybe the pain calls to the spirits. Our spirits are blessed. So a lot of the shaman discussions, the idea is that if you are a blessed person, we call that pathology or disease, but that's a blessing because it enables you to see through the spirit world easier than the average person who is not blessed, or we would say not have pathologies.
And you're certainly motivated to go to those alternative healing modalities in that realm for healing.
Absolutely. And so here's another very famous burial complex from the same site, a different area of the site. But for a long time, we thought it was 2 males and a female. New genetic studies suggest DNA that it's a male. But this person had major pathology as a person in the middle. The bones of the legs, upper legs, and also the arms were all put in at different lengths and levels. This person would have walked with a limp if the person was mobile. I mean, there's been articles, journal articles by MDs that have written on all the pathologies in this person's body. This person is in modern sensibility, not theirs, but ours, has a lot of medical issues. It would have been a short, painful life for this person, according to medical doctors, but that painful life would have made this person see into the spirit world probably easier, if you will. Yeah, there are lots of publications of those. For those that are interested later, I can send you references. I'm collecting all those. Another one is Shangar in Moscow. This is the one that's closer to Moscow. The other one's not. Sorry, got myself confused. But we would call these disabled children, and they were extremely well cared for, and they received extravagant burials, and they were with artifacts and carvings and shell beads, ivory beads that people think are shamanic in nature. This is what their long bones looked like. Extremely bone. These are other individuals with extreme, in medical terms today, extreme pathologies. What's interesting is there's a boy and a girl. The boy was about 12 years old and had very healthy teeth, which most people in this culture, teeth are gone from eating things with a lot of grains, wearing down the teeth. His teeth were really healthy, suggesting that he was fed soft food and porridge. People are taking care of him. He also had these deformed leg bones, which is unusual for hunters and gatherers because usually they're up and moving on the landscape and happen to go hunting and these things. So it indicates that he is well cared for. And then the other humans in this site, their grave goods are nowhere near as elaborate and not as many. So again, a high status for these children. This is Eric Trinkhaus, who's in the National Academy of Sciences. He teaches over at Washington University over in St. Louis. He has a lot of publications on the pathology of these people. So that's another article I can throw at you if you're interested. Here's just another interesting person going out into South Wales, kind of doing a tour of Europe, if you will. It was originally called the Red Lady because the founder thought it was a prostitute, but it wasn't. It was actually a male. And he was stained in red ochre, had a shell necklace, and then this incredible staff rod, which often we think of cross-culturally speaking of calling in the spirits, working the spirits, or maybe their axis mundi, that traveling portal between the lower world, middle world, and the upper world, lots of interpretations. So this is called sometimes a shaman as well, a medical practitioner that was put in burial. This one is probably a little less known. It hit the news about 2008. It made big news. And this is a Natufian woman about 20,000 years ago from what we now call modern Israel. Fabulous burial. She also has a lot of pathology. She has spinal and hip damage. She would have walked with her leg dragging, but she lived to be fairly old, I think in her 40s as well, an older woman. And she's buried with a lot of tortoises and other rare animals, which suggests maybe she's engaging and talking with turtles and tortoises. Something's interesting about her context with these turtles. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, it reminds me of something in the New World from Texas. So now we're jumping the world into Texas.
They would often bury a shaman with his artifacts, his or her
Absolutely, with his artifacts. And this comes to play with her and him. The Horn Shelter #2 out of Texas dates about 11,000 years ago. There's a fabulous YouTube channel and video here with Peggy Drody, who is one of the Smithsonian archaeologists that looks at this person, along with Doug Osley, a physical anthropologist. And I have the video link in the next slide down for people to look at, but I'm borrowing out of a publication book and then also this. But this gentleman, and this is his cast that was put based on his physical characteristics, what he might have looked like in real life, and some of his artifacts that were buried with him. Here's an artistic rendition of this Horn Shelter. It's a very deeply stratified site. He and a girl that he's buried with are way down. And for those that want this, you can either search on YouTube by recognizing an ancient healer in his 11,000-year-old medicine bundle, or you can just type this URL. So I'll pause there if you want to write that down. It's really worth listening to Peggy talk about it. Fabulous find. Can I go forward, you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this is the burial of the man and woman, and they had limestone rocks around it. They're like a turtle. And so they put the superstructure over that's reminiscent of a turtle. They're like a turtle effigy, like a two-headed turtle in the burial. Whoops, I touched my computer slide. Sorry. Okay, with him, lots of turtle shells with the male, not the female. The female had only a broken bone needle, and the bone needle was broken before she was interred. So she has very little, but he has a lot. Anyway, because of all the turtles with him, they suggest that he has a strong connection with turtles. He also, the male had shell beads, 4 perforated coyote teeth, and most of the items were recovered near the man's head and neck and torso. With him are these fabulous artifacts that Dr. Giro talks about, Peggy. One is the stylus. A lot of medicine men use tattooing as a form of healing, and the stylus. So if you have a lower back problem, they'll take and do ritual and do some tats on the lower back. Or if you have a bad wrist, this is people do up in the Inuit do it today. They'll put tattoos around a wrist if it's bothering you to house and take care and negotiate with the spirits that are damaging the wrist. So she and Osley think that this is what this is used for, these type of medical tattooing. These were originally thought 20 years ago to be for flint knapping, but they have the wrong type of wear on these. They actually look like they're used to ground. So take the turtle shell upside down and grind, and they have polishing and striations with red ochre put in. So it looks like he is using his artifacts to grind red ochre. We find red ochre. Yes, exactly. Over and over. Another curious thing, about this individual is his forearms, the muscles or the bones and the muscle attachments suggest that he is really strong, and they think he's a drummer. So they think he's a shaman who was doing drumming. grinding ochre, maybe other medicinal plants and things like that, and doing tattoo. So they make the argument that he's a shaman. I would suggest if he's a shaman and in trance, like what you just said, Laura, you know, the turtles and that accompaniments are probably related in trance. Maybe he saw himself as a turtle, or the turtles came to him and told him what he needed to do. It's curious because one of the questions we have in this group is, how can we be on Zoom from Australia to North America to France and elsewhere and have very similar visions? How is it that we can have a person from Israel and Texas with all these turtles over the millennia? This is fascinating that we can have these related visions and ideas as humans.
And what does it say about the nature of reality?
Exactly, the nature of reality. Well, and Peggy in her video talks about all the different shamans globally about the same time, and they're all doing these type of activities. So she adds even more depth to this discussion. Another one we see going into Texas, I'm kind of just stopping in Texas for a minute, is what's been called the White Shaman of the lower Pecos, Texas area. And I'm stuck. I hate that when my Zoom gets stuck. We can date the binders of it, but here's a case where this is considered the Great White Shaman. Zigzag images, different things are going on. Maybe a celebration or a raise and greet in the spirits or something like that is going on in this part of the world. A lot of people buy this. Her and her husband, and he's a paleobotanist, have evidence in this part of the world for things like peyote being taken. So peyote goes back several thousand years ago in Texas, being eaten to have altered states of consciousness.
We still relate to this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can do it without taking peyote. This is our work in near Janos, Mexico, in Chihuahua. This is one of our field crews, and I'm actually out there carrying a baby. I'm really terrible. I'm carrying Roy, and Roy's now towers over me, but we're out here, and this is Dr. Todd. I call my husband jokingly with when all our students are together, keep us right, Todd, down here. This is a rock art site in Chihuahua that we recorded. I mentioned it at the end of last time, I think, and I got talking to Larson. Anyway, this is called Cerro del Diablo because in Spanish, the hill of the devil, because these anthropomorphs have horns, but their arms are raised up in this position, that W-like position that we ask people at the end. And so something interestingly happens from the Upper Paleolithic to the Archaic worldwide. We see in the Upper Paleolithic lots and lots of animals, but then in certain places in the world, when we get to the Archaic period, people start getting really fascinated with geometrics. And boy, the rock art just blows up with geometrics. This site is just like that, just geometrics and a few animals, lizard-like things out here, some birds, lots of zigzags, probably snakes out there. The zigzags here, those circles, concentric circles that we see so often in trance, boy, it blows up all over Cerro del Diablo. And I always thought maybe it was shamanic, but boy, after doing trance state with you guys, I'm just like, wow, it's just, I see this stuff even more. And the more I look at Cerro del Diablo, the pictures, this site's gone now. It's been pretty much blown off the face of the earth, unfortunately. Wow. But when I look at the art, I'm just like, yes, so many topics and layers of it that gets really chaotic, but I'm like, wow, it does look like trance states. It was really curious when I was pulling this together. Is this design right here that you asked for, Laura? I thought we saw something very similar in the rock art. And again, just layers of geometrics and zigzags, other things that we don't know what they mean. But I would propose that we have shamans that tell us that these things we call Anthropology, our spirits, our knowledge, and that information comes with this stuff. So I think Carolyn said earlier on chat, she always associates this with the four directions. It may be that people in the past associated this with the four directions, but definitely probably meant something to them. It probably had emotional meaning. And the fact that they will go out of their way to peck it on the rock art, I think means that they're trying to record it. They're trying to understand it. It's important to them. It's significant to them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just a similar design. I thought this is a close-up of this X-like circle bubble thing. I know science here, bubble thing.
They show up to you and they're lit up, they're scintillating, they're moving, they're rotating,
Absolutely.
they're dancing, yeah.
Spinning, moving, and all kinds of stuff is happening. I've thought for a number of years that rock art, a lot of it is people go, this is based on Lewis Williams' work, but people are trying to record their trance states, like our journaling notebook. They're trying to grapple with it and remember it, and they peck it in on their rock art. I don't know. Yesterday in trance, when I was with you guys, boy, my hands went almost numb. They didn't feel quite normal. And I think you mentioned this earlier, Laura, with the breeze running through your hair. Sometimes you can feel the wind coming through your hands, or your hands get hot, or they get cold, or they disappear, or they turn into bear paws. It's interesting that the hands here are really elongated, and the feet too, which I would suggest as a product also of trance. If the Cerro del Diablo is a shamanic rock art site, then we see that with the hands and the feet happening.
It's a fitting way to describe it.
This site is associated with bedrock mortars. They're basically big conical shaped holes into the earth where they would have ground mesquite beans, and that's where my husband's work is, on the groundstone aspect of the site. But this one, they pecked in almost this anthropomorphic picture. I asked my husband this morning, I go, do you think that's like the name of this is my bedrock mortar? Or do you think that's the spirit of the bedrock mortar? Or what do you think? And I think he said, I'm not sure, or I don't know, because that's something we normally don't think of, but they did take and carve in these in the bedrock mortars at Cerro del Diablo. A lot of times we think about them singing and dancing at cave art or shamanic art site, dancing, drumming, and the echoing off the walls. If you can't go into the cave, you do it on the cave or on the side of the rock wall. They also will do it on the bottom, so they'll carve directly on top of the stone. And here's just one of those broken bedrock mortars that was busted at the site. But keep in mind that they'll use all the rock at a site for various reasons. So kind of going up into time. So we went, I know I'm all over the map, from ancient shamans of Europe to a look at the New World, just a quick look in Texas, and into Janos, which borders Texas, or rather Chihuahua, that borders Texas. But Nancy Bonneville speaks 7 languages, North American Indian languages, and she's written a lot on two-spirits and gender issues. She writes a textbook on North American, Native Americans. Anyway, she says throughout Native American groups recognize blessed people that embody both male and female spirit aspects and were considered a third and sometimes a fourth gender. These are the people that can really harness that rock. They're the one that can harness the power of the tree, harness the cave power, or talk to the cave power, or talk with the breath in North America. And they had, these people are often called two spirits, and they have extraordinary spirit powers they could really draw upon and use and utilize them. And I mentioned this last week because, or I mentioned this now because last week two spirits came up in passing, but they have a very specific way of understanding the world. And I think two spirits also related to trance, and this is me hypothesizing, if you will, but I think all of us have this, where if I'm doing a male posture sometimes, or something we identify with male, I can feel very much male or masculine. One time I turned into a black bear and it felt very male, and I felt like I was a male. Some people can do these women postures and they say, wow, I really felt like I was a woman. And I think in trance states, we can definitely shift from one, if you will, gender knowledge and shift into that male, female, and that in trance, that division is not as clear or even important in trance. So I think that the two spirits are a reflection of.
That's one of the boundaries that tends to dissolve, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And our sexuality dissolves in trance, and that would be very Native American. Mm-hmm. But they're powerful people. I really like this. We have these in rock art, ancient ones as well, where we see a person with half of the body's male and half is female, and in pottery prehistorically. And so we know that groups in the Southwest had these notions prehistorically as well.
So that's why that figure was wearing 2 different hairstyles,
Yeah, it's
by the
depicting
side.
of the two spirit, this powerful person who is both male and female at the same time. There are some cases of hermaphrodites in the New World that become powerful medicine men, medicine women, two spirits, because they can do both male and female chores. One is Holstein Claw, and his discussion and work and sand paintings are at the Wheelwright Museum in Santa Fe. I don't know if you and Paul have been able to go up there, Laura, but that's a fact. Yeah. And that was a
Good style.
person
Yeah.
who was identified as one biological sex, then had a horse accident, found out he was the other sex, but was hermaphrodite. And what this gave Hosting Claude the ability was he learned one craft, but then he was able to do the other craft. And what he upset Navajo Nation with, the Dene, was he took sand paintings that medicine men did, and then because he could do the female craft of weaving, he took sand paintings and put them into weavings for rugs, and he upset the elders and he mixed the two. And we know those today as these Yibashe rugs and whatnot. And so that was a case of a two-spirit that had that right to learn the medicine of the male, but also the female
Gender
half.
related.
Yeah.
And this figure, this sky rainbow, rather looks like Nut, the sky goddess who's bridging the sky in a similar fashion in Egypt iconography too, doesn't it?
Yeah, and these are Yebushes. Then they transfer their world. They're one of the incredible spirits that transcends space, and two spirits will interact with the rainbow man or rainbow person. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, in Native American or in Puebloan belief rather, and Navajo, mostly Navajo. One of the things in modern sensibility that keeps coming up, and you asked about emotional stuff, and it's unfortunate within anthropology, that shamans have had a lot of discussion about their emotional states.
Thanks for bringing this up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know this is one of the ones that I teach anthropology of shamanism. And I spend 2 weeks on this. This is because there's so much literature on this, and this one is tough. The old one was thought because of the people up on the Arctic Circle, the so-called medicine men, the original word shaman out of that part of the world, they had it. Arctic hysteria, the darkness of all this light drove them crazy, and they have Arctic hysteria. Or people down in Arizona, the Mojave groups, some of the medical doctors thought they're mentally ill. Other people say, oh, wow, look at shamanic art. It looks like schizophrenia. They're schizophrenic. Other people have looked at them and their crafts, especially the Maya acrobats that are shown in Maya art, where you have a human that can bring up his legs and put his feet on his shoulder. That's epileptics. That's an epileptic seizure. They're epileptics. Or at best, they have emotional problems. This could not be. Oh, let me ask one more. A modern spin on this is David Whitley in a book, and I think 2011 or so. I'd have to get back to that one. But he suggests that the cave art, the Upper Paleolithic cave art we mentioned, was by people with bipolar. And so a bipolar person will have, the depression where they don't move and do anything, but then they have this manic state of euphoria, and they'll go 4 days straight, and they'll be hyper creative, and they'll paint like crazy. One of his hypotheses is perhaps the shaman and the cave arts are bipolar, and they're going through these manic episodes to paint the cave art. That's a new modern spin on the mental health.
Maybe you have religious specialists like shamans and artists who are specialists. I mean, maybe there's different roles here, but all using the same mythology and iconography and story too. I mean, that's such a leap. Wow.
It is a leap. And I would say that most people I know that are studying shamanism and anthropology today do not believe they're mentally ill. They do not believe in Arctic hysteria, and they do not believe they're schizophrenic or epileptic. And the reason is that somebody with a pathology of the brain, which is a disease, that they have schizophrenia, they cannot negotiate daily life and become a respected elder and have a, if you will, this social prestige they have in being able to help their people. Yes, while a shaman might have glazed eyes and look a little different during trance or do something, these are people that have social prestige. They can go and do the things they knew. They're not sickly people, and that they're healthy enough to survive in their culture. And more importantly, is if it does appear that sometimes they do have moments of maybe an emotional turmoil or smallpox. Rainbow Bear talked about this. Yes, it is true that sometimes you can have a moment, and I got my slides out of order, where they have mental problems, but they fix themselves. And so what happens, according to Eliada, who is a religion professor, was that many shaman groups have these incredible initiation rites or rituals that they do, that they become a shaman, and they go through these painful ordeals. And often they have body dismemberment. Their accounts for shamans say, the spirits came and took me, they boiled me in a pot, then they dismembered me, and then they put me back together.
Mhm.
And that is true, but farmers also do this. And oops, I'm trying to toggle. This is
I have a couple comments before you go on there.
Okay.
Before you go on. Okay. So Mark Plotkin, who was in the Amazon rainforest bioprospecting for the new super drugs from their medicinal plants, was telling us that there is no mental illness in these rainforest tribes. Why? Because they had means of helping people, and it just doesn't come up. Their
Right.
society is a healing one.
Right.
So also we have a friend who's worked with the Olchi of Siberia, and she says the reason that there is such an association with mental illness and these early cultures and shamans is that our society has the blinders on. That if you talk about hallucinations or hearing voices or seeing visions, that automatically, from our societal point of view, puts you in the camp of, yikes, because schizophrenic people do see hallucinations.
Yeah.
But Goodman would always say the difference is we know when we have a vision, we don't mistake it for this reality. We know the difference between the two, and that our body knows with the cessation of the sonic driving the rattle that it is to return back to ordinary waking functioning and state. So there's really not a danger. I had a really heated discussion with an ophthalmologist who was trying to liken our visionary experiences to his wife's migraine headaches, because she saw lights where there was no feed of light into her eyes. She was seeing starbursts and all of this. And my response was, and correct me or tell me what you think, Christine, as I was just pulling this out of my logic. My response was, it may be that there's certain activation of the visual cortex and the visual center, and that a pathology like a migraine with pain, and that is a disorder, could activate some of those pathways and create visions. But also that doesn't mean that what we're doing is a pathology. It might be activating those same pathways in a healthy way. That there's many instances in where the eyes can be processing other visionary data, not just from your physical eyes. And that Goodman always said, this is for healthy nervous systems. This is for healthy nervous systems. So, so my point is that there might be reasons why. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I can just say for our own work, and we don't claim to be religious specialists, we don't claim to be shamans. We're practicing a practice that's for everyone. So this is a widespread, widely accessible access. Shamans are specialists that go deep into that realm beyond what we're doing.
Absolutely. I just want to interject there that you said what you and Felicity said is totally true. And what we know even through doing ecstatic trance postures is shamans, and what we do is controlled. Schizophrenia, when you see the voices or hallucination, is not controlled. And so the big deal that anthropologists in the 1960s and 70s started coming to the realization to, like Goodman and others, is that this whole trance-based stuff is controlled, and mediums, mystics, a lot of people will control it. And so it's the control issue where we can set up the ritual, we can do the transformation, but then we can say, no, we're done now, and we're not going to do that later. I'll do it tomorrow at 10 o'clock or whatever. So it's the control
The ritual
issue.
is part of that control mechanism.
Absolutely.
The ritual takes you in, the ritual takes you out at the appropriate time. So I just really wanted to give you our take on this. Also, in terms of being boiled alive and dismembered, yeah, that can happen in a trance state. It's not happening to your physical body. It's happening to an energetic body. The bear comes up. He's a healing, powerful healing spirit. Claws you down the middle, splits you open, reaches a hand in. You can sometimes feel a bear paw mucking about in your brain. You can feel it tingling. It's an amazing sensation. But then he zips you up and you're better. You're better. It's a form of healing that can take place in our trance. Also, dark nights of the soul, we do have, in terms of pain blocks that are being cleared out, being faced with some mini and major dark nights of the soul where you make a realization about yourself, you're letting go. I mean, it can be painful, but it is so much a relieving, a release, a shift. You welcome those kinds of moments. You're getting a lot of work done in a hurry. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
No, that's great. Adding, I like what you talk about the energetic body doing this. So yes, those vision, those sensibility, they may really feel it in their body too, and they may understand that as well. But yeah, it's their spirit body, for lack of a better word, the energetic body. Previously, I talked about causes grounded shamanism, and I have this discussion slipped in a paper in American Antiquity. But I always thought this is from the Membres culture of New Mexico, southern New Mexico, near the boot hill of New Mexico, for those that know New Mexico. But this about AD 1000, so 1,000-year-old pot, shows this person. I think that this is one of these energetic bodies. Archaeologists have talked about warfare and decapitation, but I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so, I think the shamanic initiation is that often shamans tell us when they're in trance, they see the real world, their real energetic body is their real person. In this plane, we have goggles on, we don't see so well, and this is just almost the facade. So they flip it around. What I think is happening is you have a guy with a horn plumed serpent headdress on, overseeing it. This may be an elbow pipe, I'm guessing, and this is guessing, maybe a pipe, not a sword or a knife, because it's got this hollow tube through it. But look at this, it's got this line here and a mask. And we in regular reality, according to shamans, wear a mask. And why I think this is the shamanic initiation, where the shaman is feeling himself, this body of this world is decapitated, there's still a life form, the mask, where he's becoming this shamanic initiation. That was one of my hypotheses. It slipped in there, it was published. So at least one person agreed with me, or two people, the reviewers. Probably
it's almost like the soul is released as well.
Yeah. And so something major is going on. So I thought for a long time, this is a look of a farmering, a farmer society doing shamanic initiations and Membres iconography.
You might point out.
Well, again, it's a good way to depict it.
Yeah, the heads is still connected. Yeah, the life way, the spirit energy.
Yeah, and if you had to depict it in a form of art, this is a wonderful depiction, like the other was. We have these,
and there are actually two of them.
How do you draw
there are
them?
two of these bulls that are very closely related, almost the same idea and the same depiction. The males are a little different, but yeah, this is really fascinating. Yeah.
You're giving so much strength and evidence to the whole process, what Dr. Goodman added, that you have to journal, you have to draw, you have to sketch your experiences, you have to document the experience. The journey's not done yet until you do this. This is part of the journey.
Part of the ritual.
Part of the ritual, yeah.
And I'm also not taken away from potential illnesses or pain, but there's no doubt that some shamans, medicine men, people, women can go through these times where they do have dark periods, and that they can often, to become a medicine person or a shaman, whatever you want to call them, is onerous. It means you change your life. It puts you and your family have to give into the system. There's all kinds of issues at work, and a shaman may not want to do that because you're at the bedding of the spirits as well. And it can be an onerous life for a shaman and for his or her family. But once they decide to do it and they give in, it can still be a struggle through years, and it can be bitter and last for years, according to Vivitsky on shamanism. But one of the things that anthropologists have noted for a long time, this is a 1982 book, and it's a really great book. is they're the wounded healers. They're people that have had often some mental burps, if you will, mental problem, emotional problems, a problem, or a sickness like smallpox. In this case, he lost a hand. And so when he lost that hand, that changed his path where he became a shaman. The wounded healer. These are people that are able to fix themselves medically, emotionally, and then fix their own people. And that gives them incredible bit of power. And so these are our healers often because they can do that. And they often do it through trance. I often think that maybe ecstatic trance is a really good thing if you're having pain. You know, you can get those good feelings that Laura talked about correctly, the good feelings of the trance, that, you know, momentary blip away from this reality of the pain, and then offer that to somebody else as well is important.
Be that conduit and
yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is really important for what we've been discussing with emotional, physiological, daily practice, everything together in this really interesting thing that we already know. But there's something about the shamanic sensibility, our trance states, ecstatic trance, that this special and sacred awareness of the universe is codified in song and chant. Most shamans say it's in these trance where we get that download from the universe that you so elegantly said at the beginning of your discussion to my talk, Laura. You got it right, that download from the universe. And we need to write it in song and chant, poetry and tale, and in carving and painting. And Holfact says this is not art for art, rather it's art for survival. It gives structure and coherence to the unfathomable and the intangible. By making that which is unknown, the shaman attains some degree of control over the awesome forces of the mysterium. I just love that quote. I've loved that quote for a long time. There's so much more at work that we as archaeologists can't know what chants or songs they're saying at Cerro del Diablo, but I know based on everything we know about these practitioners, things are happening. There are all kinds of poetry, sensibility, songs, chants that occurred in the past, and even in those caves of Europe.
What's fascinating to me is that these underlying patterns of nature that we're, in a sense, being shown. I mean, it
Absolutely.
looks like that on so many levels. And then modern science is starting to see those patterns as well. So it's just giving us another set of eyes.
Absolutely, another set of eyes deep in our brains somewhere, probably what neurology thinks, it puts it all together in there somehow. Yeah. And I'm going to conclude with this. Cognitive archaeologist tells us that culture matters. It impacts what we see in trance and how we interpret it. Are we always seeing bulls and bison, ibex and mammoth? Are we seeing turtles and tortoises and the implications of turtles? Religion matters. The importance of trance is different based on religion. Sometimes trance is just trance, and sometimes it's part of shamanic religion. Humans are humans. I think this is Goodman's point. Yeah, your trance experiences are extremely similar, are the same as a trance people experienced 45,000 years ago. Yeah, again, as Dr. Goodman stressed. So what is different is culture, not physiology. Shamans of old were the ones placed in elaborate burials. Modern mystics might be completely ignored. That is my end for now.
You had somebody put up this comment, which is interesting.
Okay, my husband is sitting here with the computer and moderating also the chat room a little bit.
Well, before you get to that, I just want to say modern mystics might be completely ignored. I want to say a shout out to the neo-shamans, to the culture that now embraces in all of these ways the whole marketplace of avenues to dive right into these realms. We don't have it in a codified, institutionalized culture, but people are finding it regardless. Why? Because it exists, because we have avenues, because the doors must be thrown open, because we are drawn to this, because the spirits call us. And this is the call to adventure that we're all answering. So whether it's the culture pats us on the back and says, yes, as it did in old, or that it doesn't, and we say, we're going to find our way anyway. I just want to say that we're right there. We're right there with that. We're the next rung on a very long and ancient chain. So hallelujah. Go ahead. Just had to say that.
Well, go ahead.
I'm happy to have you, Laura, and Paul ask questions or comment, and I'm also happy to throw this thing open. And more importantly, did anybody see that design that was at Sarawak, Kenya, besides Carolyn? Thank you, Carolyn, but I'm curious about that.
So what yesterday's experience on Saturday, someone drew the sketch, held up their notebook and showed us the experience, and somehow it slipped us from documenting who that was. And then you found this image again and the artifact. And so it was like, look at this. This is what the person shared with us. Who was that person? We don't remember.
I don't think it was this last Saturday. I think it was a couple Saturdays ago.
I think it was a couple Saturdays ago.
Oh, okay. A couple.
Which is really fabulous because I think it was when we did greeting the spirits that you named this.
Yes.
And it's curious to me. I mean, as a scientist, my head just spins thinking about if that person drew that when we did that posture, when the same design somebody had 2,500 years ago versus 2 weeks ago doing the same posture is just fabulous. Just mystery.
Because you saw
mysterious and fabulous. I don't know, just saying.
Because you saw that same posture on that rock slide. Can you unscreen share so we can see your beautiful?
Yes, I can. Let me do that. Sorry.
That was wonderful presentation.
Yeah, very
Thank
good.
You so much.
I know.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So much. And
a little scattered, but thank you.
not
Wasn't
scattered at all. It was
No,
absolutely
that was brilliant.
fabulous, fantastic, and we're so blessed to have you join us in this exploration.
It's one thing for us to say, it's another thing for you to say it with the academic standing and
putting it in
the years of
perspective.
research in your realms that you have. So appreciate that. So let's take some questions, comments. Who's up?
Well, let's,
Who's up next?
rather than me trying to go back and read the entire chat room, if you want to ask a question.
What was the one you found, Todd, you thought I should
Todd, if
do?
you find one.
Todd, jump on and read the chat for us if you would.
Yeah, Todd had one he just showed me about in trance yesterday. Somebody had a bison, I think he said.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think Michael yesterday said the charcoal sketches and bisons type stuff. When he said that, I'm like, I've been thinking about the Upper Paleolithic, so I was really curious because we would be talking the very next day about stuff that he actually saw yesterday. This is, I mean, there's places where our science leaves what we can't explain, but where our mysticism steps in and we're like, something is happening to us as a human. We're able to see that, yes, it was Michael yesterday. And the journey yesterday, the bison with whom I was engaging was half human. Also, the drawings I saw at first looked a lot like the images you're sharing from Lascaux Cave. Absolutely. When you said that yesterday, I was stunned. And yes, absolutely. I don't know what else to say other than yes. And then these things would have been with torches. And those torchlight would have made them flicker and move, and they would have been just amazing to see.
Well, Michael raised his hand. So Michael, you want to go ahead and turn on your mic? And
while you're doing that, I just want to say that at a recent SAA meeting that Paul and I got to attend, there was a whole discussion on, and this was in Mayan caves, that they're now paying attention to the sites where the torches were on the cave floor or where they were positioned. And now they go in and not brightly lighting the whole cave, which loses that shadow light play, but they're darkening the cave, and they now have torches that don't put out any emission because they don't want to damage the walls.
Right.
They're placing them flickering as they would have in old, to imitate the old torches or the old stone lamps or whatever. And now we actually got to see video of the flickering of faces and the bulges of the rock, the natural contours of the rock wall where they place these things come into play. So there's great shadow and light play to bring these things alive. Yeah.
And that was one of the,
which should give them more power. I think to human sensibility would have brought them so much more power and the mystery into play.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most magical parts about visiting the caves in France was showing how they did the drawings using the outcroppings, using every aspect of the stone and the rock and the wall in a way.
It was half suggested by the natural formations of the rock, and they just added an eye or finished it off. Long curls of stalagmites would be the mammoth. It would be like, oh, I see the mammoth too. And now you've added the little features to say you've seen it too.
Right. And I pulled the slide for time, but Shamanic Cave is one of the great ones where the rock boulder is both a bison man and a Venus figurine in the same time. It's totally a two-spirit, but it's three-dimensional. I took it out because it's really hard to get a good photograph of it. And so people know it, they sense it, but trying to photograph that is really tough. So I had this photo and it just looked like a blob. So I deleted it. But yes, that completely.
There's also portable art from the Paleolithic that you can't tell if it's depicting male or female attributes, because they seem to be an interesting combination of the two. So I hadn't really considered them to be a representation of two spirits. That idea might go back.
I think it probably does. And I think, again, it's our neurology. Maybe when trance state, this division between male, female evaporates, as you said, Laura, so well. Yes.
Yeah. And you certainly understand the hybrid figures back in the Paleolithic. When we have those, we have a whole category of postures, metamorphosis, where you become the animal. You see through its eyes, you feel your paws, you feel the fur grow. It's an extraordinary experience. And it is, I'm one with the web of life. And it's all about conditioning us, I think, to be more responsible members of the web of life, to understand them as all part of the family.
So let's take a couple
Michael,
of
where's
comments.
Michael?
Michael's on, and
Yeah.
then Frederick's after. Fred's on after Michael. Michael?
Oh, hey. Yeah, I was a really good journey yesterday. And it's when you shared those slides, I thought this is exactly what I saw. Ochre walls. I thought it was a cow, but it wasn't. It was a bison. And they were charcoal drawings, and I could see how they were drawn. And then they started to move, but look like a flip book kind of movement. And I noticed that it was the flickering light from the fire that got them moving, because they were overlapping drawings. And it's funny because this last week or so, I've been having precognitive dreams all week, really elaborate dreams, but the theme or the element of information that was coming across was the next day's whatever message, note, reality. So I'm finding all this stuff really great. And in terms of two-spirit and gender work and stuff like that, I'm a psychotherapist, and I lead a lot of these workshops to help people. And a lot of the balancing I do is pulling people out of their gender imprint expectations and pull them into their more timeless spiritual identity. So more like transpersonal psychology, really. And I found that it's super balancing for people because it pulls us out of the identity politics of the time, which is really a big ego trap, I find. And so the journey work is this really magical way of having people redefine themselves and see themselves in a much bigger context. So I appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you. And
Michael.
I appreciate yours too. And I would love to talk with you sometime over email if you're available.
Yeah, very much so. I was thinking the same exact thing. I'll definitely email you privately.
And if you just look at Christine Vanpool at University of Missouri, you'll find my email. I'm really easy to find.
We want to hear from you too, Michael. So include hello at Queen Manga.
Yeah, include them because good juicy stuff I copy and forward to them too, and make sure they are in on the discussion.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to add, I went to grad school in Santa Fe. I went to Southwestern College.
Oh, nice.
I
love Santa Fe.
I was going to say, of course you did, because we have so many connections to Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's a constant conversation. But in fact, the next person that's going to speak is Fred, who his family is from Santa Fe.
Oh, well,
he was one of our speakers a while back that talked about trance states in ancient India. It's on YouTube. It's a great discussion you're going to want to hear.
And Ellie on Valentine's Day will dive into gender issues too. So something to be explored. Thank you, Michael. Next time, turn your video on. I'll see you.
Yeah.
Hey, Fred.
Speaking of Fred, Fred, did you have any questions besides 500 or one you want to shoot right now for the group to think about?
I have about more than 500.
Oh, I think I saw you said only about 500 questions. I'm like, wow, that'll keep me busy for a lifetime.
That's minimum, but I'm only gonna start out with like 2 questions, and hopefully they will be very, very brief. One is I'm looking out the window here, just a few hours north of you, in the middle of Missouri to the middle of southeast Iowa, and I see like about 1.5 feet of snow, and I wonder, with all the cave art and all of this, one of the things that's eluded me in looking at that material is art that reflects the seasons. Can you really distinguish cave art from summertime as from wintertime?
I haven't answered
No, I can't. And I think maybe that might be related to you're in the Ice Age. and glaciation is around now. Yes, some of the tundra starts to thaw and lighting changes. But another curious thing about the Upper Paleolithic art is a lot of the animals that are being shown are the ones that they're not always hunting. There seems to be something reverent about some of those animals. And so it may be that their sensibility, they have their own sensibility and they don't feel like the seasons are that important, and maybe something about those particular animals. I'm just guessing. Of course, this is just speculation.
I want to say that seasons did come into play because we were, when we were touring all the painted caves of around Les Isles and that area of France, the guides were pointing out that, oh, look, this is a pregnant animal. This is an animal in the rutting season. This is an animal in spring. This is an animal in winter. You can see its winter coat and the extra fur that it grows. That the artists were so accurately depicting the flora and fauna that they knew so well, that they were also depicting the seasonal expression of those animals and those particular attributes. And it's only our eyes who aren't as familiar with those particular animals and their seasonal annual.
That's true. And so when scientists
very well knew those.
So when scientists sit there and look at, they're not thinking about the seasonality as clearly. Yeah, the subtle cues.
Art is so sophisticated. The art is so honed. The art is so beautifully rendered that it is absurd to me to think that an artist would not be a full-time artist and specializing in that, and that he could also be doing shamanic duties. That's ridiculous. You're going to have
I would agree
that are specialists. You're going to have religious specialists that are specialists in that. There's, well,
and the other thing is that there's so many debates about the art too, and there's been debates about, do we have constellations? Can we identify those dots as constellations or not? And that's out of my wheelshed. We need Tony to come in. But if there are constellations, then they would also be related to seasonality. And you could do, actually, just thinking about this, a quick seasonality check with constellations to the pregnant animals. That would be an interesting way to double check the context itself. There are ways to explore it. I always tell my students, just got to figure out what traits and associations put together to test, but there's some in-building testing we could do. Yeah. Sorry, Fred.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Long ago wrote a paper on how Lascaux could be a sky chart with the Pleiades on the dots of the cows, but also he said standing at the entrance, the old entrance that's no longer, in the reproduction, that you would see, dial it back to 17 or 20,000 years to that time, you would see representational among the whole frieze of the famous Hall of Bulls. You would see those constellations reconfigured. But anyway, go ahead. We should dive.
My corollary question to that was that have you observed that there is any kind of qualitative difference between trance states in summer and winter? This might be more evident in your Kiva in Kaimenge rather than, I mean, how do seasons, how do, local surface topography that changes reflect that?
I'll just do an academic answer.
Yeah.
Looking at, Native American ethnographies, there are times of the year that you're so busy that it's prohibited that you don't do a lot of trance work. And then other times of year, like the wintertime, the wintertime's a really good time to tell your origin stories, tell your cultural stories, do your performances. And it's also, the wintertime is the best time to do shamanic rituals, but also at nighttime. And so we see a lot of ethnographies where night and winter are the prime times to do this practice, but summertime in the middle of the day is the time you would not do that, at least according to the ethnographies. So I think there's some type of sensibility in prehistory that people probably had similar things going on as well, because a lot of the native people in North America have these elaborate ceremonial cycles that follow the seasons, and they prescribe when they can and can't do a lot of different practices, even hunting. It can be particular times of year you can't go hunting. Yeah.
Big Kiva right outside of Albuquerque, where they have recreated the murals, and the guides will tell you this follows the season. Different ceremonies, different plant, different symbols follow the season. So, yeah. I would say that the best we do, because we do this all year round, the best we do is there are some artifacts that have association with the full moon. We like to do those on the full moon. So we do a little bit of, if we find a symbol, we try to, but not too tightly.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I know you're doing all your trance posture trainings during what is in North America often the daytime daylight hours. Have you guys explored doing it at night?
We have. Yes, we have. We have done with blocking all the light in the kiva
we've done
at
extensive stuff at the
We've
Institute.
done it at night.
Mhm.
So, and
Part of it had to do
I
with
think there's a case to be made that it was a nighttime process often.
this has been a practicality of being able to include Europe, because if we did later in the day, they'd all be in bed. And we've already lost Australia. So we're trying to find a middle point of time zones that we can get people to participate. That's been part of it. But at the Institute, we do multiple postures a day, and we have evening rituals. And so there's a process by which all that
A
transpires.
lot of people put a mask over their eyes too, just to block the light, because you want to not activate that. And I try to turn the lights low. So we do.
Yeah.
But that's an
Well, and then going to
scientific
Fred's
study would be a
question,
unique one.
does that make your experience different, night versus day different then?
That would
We've never
we'd
studied
have to
that
go back
question.
and look at notes.
Yeah.
Investigations to come.
There's also the physiological impact. In other words, if you're tired at the end of the day, but at the Institute, we always try to take a siesta. We try to take a break so the nervous system can recover some before we go back into trance again. And so we have kind of I've looked, so part of it is, and also how many days you've been at the Institute. So you've been there for 3 days, you've done, 6, 7 postures, all this is happening, the physiology shifts. So it's hard to measure it, to know whether that evening posture was because it was in the evening, or was it because, we've pushed you to the point now that you're going to open up whether you like it or not.
Right. And then the Maya people believe that, and most of Mesoamerican cultures believe that night times when the spirits are active. So spirits tend to be asleep during the daytime. So if you accept the possibility of spirits being most active at night, then if we want to really, contact a variety of spirit, maybe nighttime's the time that one should do that, at least in the ethnographic record. It's an interesting question though.
I don't know. But this is not a daily practice for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Really good question.
Good one, Fred.
Yeah. More questions before, by the way, we only have, according to why we schedule things, you have 10 minutes left. So if you've had some pressing question that you would like to ask, this is your chance before we close out today's ceremony. I mean, it feels like a ceremony, but today's presentation. Christine, I'm, so pleased that we have met you and that we get to work with you and Todd and all that you bring to the table in terms of the discussion. We're an institute that's open to being a clearinghouse of the ASC experiences. And so we're not limited to just understanding ecstatic trance. We want to understand the full spectrum of that trance state and where it's coming from. And so we want to somehow, in whatever degree that we're able to, follow those footsteps of Dr. Goodman being someone who wanted to explore and open the doors up. And so it takes researchers like yourselves that are dedicated to this to take us to a place that we can't do all on our own. We need that kind of assistance. And Fred's the same way. Fred has been so helpful to us as well. So.
And I would say that everyone who does this work, you're a scientist as well as you're the observer as well as the subject. That we are really, this is our inner technology that we are experimenting with, and our conscious experience is one of the dials that gives us a readout of this. It's fascinating. We're just trying to catch up on the lost cultural DNA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, as your student, I'm sitting underneath your Zoom classes. It's really been amazing learning experience for me as well. And I've learned so much. And when I go back and I look at my pictures, like from Sarawak, Kenya, I'm like, wait a minute, I saw somebody drew that. And I learned from other people, and it just is really, for lack of a better word, shocking, fabulous, mysterious, how we can have these similar things happening in trance that mimic stuff from the Upper Paleolithic, from the halls of the bulls to Antoptic imagery that we might call the Medela into trance. And so I think that, at least in anthropology, there's so much we don't know. And as much as people like Goodman and others, and even Frederick, and he has a huge book. I'm still working for that book, Fred. I'm going to get back to you. That's huge. We're still, I think, in some ways on the cusp of understanding stuff. I think there's still so much to be learned, both from the science, but the experience and the practical. It's all in a neat package. And I think everyone here is it's really helping me better hone and be a better anthropologist. And I want to do a special shout out to Laura, because she asked me questions that are really hard, and she makes me think about all the stuff chaos in my brain and trying to bring it into an answer or a sensibility that she finds important. And this is actually helping me be a better professor, a better teacher, and hopefully soon better publications. But it's still a learning process for myself and through everyone and through Laura and Paul. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's
I want to
Laura's-
call on Brian Tucker. Go ahead.
Oh, you're gonna call him
You're gonna
Brian?
come on, go ahead.
If you'd like. Yeah. Brian, if you'd like to be thrown in.
There's not a lot I can add. Christine, you've done a wonderful job. It's so encouraging. I hope you represent a breed of anthropologists, who are traveling between these worlds of science and intuition with your.
I'm following Goodman slowly behind her.
Yeah, it's very reassuring. I'm blown away. I just don't have a lot to offer in the commentary right now. I'm trying to synthesize a lot of these talks. John and Kathleen Matthews, when I had asked them about the tale of Orin and the fact that Orin was a figure in Irish mythology, Celtic mythology, that was buried underground. And when he emerged out of his burial, he had astonishing information to present to St. Columba and the community. And it was so astonishing that they buried him back into the ground.
I don't want to hear it. Don't tell us.
TMI.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like, we're kind of unearthing this mysterious quality about reality that our culture hasn't really grappled with. And maybe with quantum physics, we're beginning to touch into just how mysterious a world we live in. But it seems to me, and in your presentation, the ancients have a lot more to tell us about how mysterious it could. The fact that we're so interconnected with nature isn't well understood, but
Right.
it was so well depicted in these images. So
Right.
I'm just looking for the integration, and it takes a while to sense
It
that.
does.
So I appreciate what you're bringing forth for all of us.
Well,
and you do fabulous stuff, Brian. Keep bringing it together. I go to your blogs very
Thank
often.
you.
So it was your discussion when you were out here on Zoom was very enlightening, and some of the work you've done with the different mystics and nuns and priests, I found that really useful. So I appreciate you.
And
Great,
you've
thank
just taken a course on cosmology, so we want to hear your report on that and how you synthesize it with all this, because
I'll hope to
when
synthesize
scientists
it.
say, oh, the structure of our brain is similar to the structure of the cosmos, I'm like all ears. Like,
Those
yeah,
neuron bundle thingies with the way they go out. I don't know. I sometimes
Yeah.
think about that. Yeah.
yeah, it
Right,
seems to be
thank
all
you.
those threads that we see, those pathways, those lines that we're crossing. Oh yeah, I know those. Yeah, tell us. So very cool.
and
Thank you.
and Brian's part of that advisory committee that's helping us push forward along with Christine and Fred and so
Yeah.
it's been really fun.
There is a new universe story that we're telling, and this is part of it. This is the direct experience of what's unfolding, I think, in this work. So,
And
thank
we
you.
look. Can I before we close, I just want to mention that Todd is coming on
Oh,
in the middle
yes.
in the middle
Yes.
of next month. Todd Vanpool, and there's going to be a fascinating discussion.
So Todd, can you jump on and highlight a little bit?
Put him on the
for
spot.
you? Little preview.
Laura's good at that, asking people just to jump on.
Yeah.
Is he available, Christine? And she's talking to him.
Sure, I'm going to. You turn off your. Sorry, we've got two computers running right next to each other. And I'm not going to have my video on because our bandwidth doesn't allow me to do both of the videos at the same time without freezing up. So we'll talk about the archaeology of the North American Southwest. Chris and I have worked in that area for, oh heavens now, 30 years, I guess would be about right. First field season was in 1991, so about 30 years. We're going to be talking about some of the work we've done that is in, we're looking at some cultures that span from central Arizona on over into central New Mexico down into northern Chihuahua. We're going to be looking at the role that religion plays within those cultures. The time period we're looking at came about after the fall of Chaco. So it was kind of a bad time where there was a lot of violence going on, a lot of violence within communities, a lot of violence between communities. We're going to look at how religion helped mitigate that violence, helped tap down the amount of violence, and helped create social cohesion over a fairly large area of the Southwest.
All right.
Exciting. See, it can be done. And I think that's so important for us to understand today. We can heal the divisiveness.
We've done it before.
I want to say again, thank you, Christine. Laura sent me a little note on the side here. She said, maybe it'd be appropriate for you to end today with flute because you gave us such a wonderful description of how the language of flute is the language of spirit. And maybe that'd be a great way to honor you for what you brought to the table today.
And Felicitas,
and Felicitas's birthday.
You've been the perfect guest for the Felicitas birthday celebration.
Oh, thank you. I am so honored by that.
Anthropologist.
I'm so honored. Birthday weekend because her birthday was yesterday, but this is the weekend. And so we appreciate that connection and that energy. And I want to thank all of you for participating.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Paul, your beautiful flute, please.
All right, we'll play a little bit of flute and then we'll say thank you so much. And I'm just going to end immediately afterwards. So thank you all for coming and I'll click the end button.
If it were me, I would be.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Christine.
Aloha.
Aloha.